it's not necessarily an inspiring love story. Because this guy is bringing unaddressed baggage and luggage and idolatry into this relationship. And he wants it so badly, he'll forget everything else to do it. It's unhealthy. It's ungodly. And it can kind of be a problem in two ways. I mean, it could be the person that you're interested in or you have some romantic notion about. Maybe they're unspiritual and they have idols in their heart that you don't know about. Or it could be the other way around. The person that you're interested in or you're infatuated with, they're a spiritual person, but you've got your own hidden luggage. And rather than sort of being honest, it's sort of like, I'm going to bring these things in because I just want this so badly. I'll do anything to get it. And I don't care by what process I do it. It's interesting, even when I was dating Jess and I came out here to Spokane, I always kind of felt like the brothers had like a little checklist. You know, like, I was always thinking maybe there's like a little clipboard, maybe one in the back that or something like that. You don't want to bring this kind of stuff into a relationship. It's destructive. And what Jacob has done here is he's left his idol of ambition temporarily, and he's run into the arms of a new idol, which is this relationship. And for some of us, it's not actually a relationship that exists. It's actually just the notion of a relationship that can cure all, help me escape, be all, end all, absorb me, and help me forget about everything else that I'm trying to forget about right now. It's a dangerous idol. It's a super dangerous idol. Well, anyway, for Jacob, he ends up giving 14 years to get Rachel, and then stays, I think, another 6 or 7 years just working the land there. He becomes extremely wealthy. He's very, very successful at what he does in managing animals. And he also becomes a victim of his own deceit. Because interestingly enough, God decides to introduce someone into his life who is equally as deceiving as he is, Laban. And so it's funny, Laban actually begins to trick him consistently. And it must have gotten under his skin because you can tell he took great pride in the way he was able to deceive people and get what he wanted. And so God has this kind of funny way of beginning to humble him and shake him up a little bit and help him come to reality in his senses. This idol of relationship is really intense, and there was this funny story where Jess and I were in our living room, and our son, we're basically just trying to teach him to be affectionate to certain people that were around and things like that. And so we're like, hey Josiah, if someone that we know pretty well is around, we tell him, give loves or give a hug, give a kiss, something like that, if someone we know pretty well. And so we were just practicing this at home. We didn't have anybody over, but we also had one of his little training potties out in the living room. You guys probably know where I'm going with this. And so at one point, we were doing a little practice, and Jess and I were both standing there right next to him, and I'm like, Josiah, go give mommy loves. Show some affection. You can practice. And so what does he do? He walks towards mom, and then walks by her and kisses the potty toilet. Okay, so I know that my wife was not fired up about that. I was laughing hysterically. But the idolatry relationship is ugly. It's like literally going to kiss a toilet rather than valuing God. That's a silly example, but it's true. It's true. Let's follow Jacob's life a little bit farther. He seems to be able to get himself in more and more trouble. Flip over to Genesis 32. In Genesis 32, verses 23 through 30, there's this famous passage here about where Jacob wrestles with God. Pick it up in verse 23, chapter 32. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. In this passage, and then also in another passage just a little bit earlier, Jacob has a very two intense experiences with God. One is a dream, where he actually dreams of a vision, so it's sort of in his mind. This one actually physically took place. This is Jesus in an angelic form presenting himself to Jacob. It's called a theophany, some weird theological word. But Jesus does this in a bunch of places in the Old Testament. And it's one of the ways that he shows his presence in the Old Testament. But the deal is that God is reaching out to us as we have our idols. He's approaching us through people, through dreams, through guilt, through conscience. Sometimes he approaches us with a person with the Bible. The question is are we even willing to take a look at ourselves? Or is our arm always kind of output, holding people back, saying, God, a little bit later. I've got some other things I'm interested in right now. Jacob's kind of experiencing this, and I think God would have rescued Jacob from some more hardship if he would have let him, but he wasn't ready. He wanted to go to his idols a little bit longer. And so even God is reaching out to him, trying to rescue him in advance, and he's kind of keeping him at arm's length, keeping him at distance. And so what ends up happening here is that he has to come back face to face with his brother Esau, because that never went away. The consequences that come as a result of sin, they may be forgiven, but that doesn't mean there's still not consequences. And it doesn't mean we need to continue to feel like ongoing guilt and shame about it. We're forgiven. But at the same time, it does mean that damage is done, and that it may come back at us. Sin has consequences. And so Jacob has to face his brother Esau. The idols that Jacob faced was this selfish ambition, wanting to get something. His deceitfulness. I want to get something, but I want to do it the way that I want to do it, no matter what the cost, no matter what happens. He had this idol of relationship in his life, where I think he put it in a place maybe to help him forget the troubles that he caused in his previous life, and was trying to run away from God and from his problems. I want to share with you, if you're kind of new around the church, or you're doing Bible studies, or maybe you've come to a Bible discussion, maybe you were a friend or a coworker that came to Women's Day yesterday. Idols are kind of sounds like religious talk, but it's very real for anyone, Christian and non-Christian. And idols are the one thing, it is the most detrimental, hated, and rebellious sin that exists. It's the worst thing that a person can do in their situation or relationship with God. Because basically it just means I've chosen something or someone over the supreme God of the universe. And so it's the most serious sin in the entire Bible. And what it can do for us, if we haven't been forgiven of it, is actually it'll take away the possibility for our salvation. If you look at chapter 32, this is a little section here about what was happening between Jacob and Esau as his brother Esau was approaching. Look at verse 20 and 21. So Esau is approaching with 400 armed men. And Jacob is basically defenseless with his family and a lot of wealth. So he's like, let me devise a plan. I'll divide up my camp here. I'll send some people ahead. Maybe I'll pacify my angry brother. Maybe he won't kill me. Look at the way he tries to solve this problem in verse 20. And be sure to say your servant Jacob is coming behind us, because he's a coward. For he thought, I will pacify him, Esau, with these gifts I am sending on ahead. Later, when I see him, perhaps he will receive me. So Jacob's gifts went on ahead of him, but he himself spent the night in the camp. What a coward. What a coward. He sends his family ahead and he hides behind. One of the most dangerous idols that non-Christians can have is morality. It's so dangerous. And the thinking behind it, or what happens in our heart, is that even though we're not truly surrendered to God, we haven't repented and become a true follower of Jesus, we think that in some way, by offering our morality and being somewhat of a good person or being a good neighbor to the people around me, that I can kind of send those gifts towards God. And that basically what I can do with my good behavior and me being at least as nice or nicer than the guy next to me is I can send that stuff up towards God, and maybe if a day of judgment comes or there's something intense later, if I put these gifts out there, God's going to be like, you know what? It's all right. I'll take your bribes. Sure. I'll overlook all this stuff that you've done. What a lie. We know that the God of the Bible will call everyone into account. Everyone will be called into account. And one of the most dangerous places that a person can rest in is to be kind of a spiritual person, but honestly they're trying to get their righteousness and their salvation by being moral.
Right.
They're not doing it by surrendering to Jesus and following him with 100% of their heart. And it is extremely dangerous because it's so deceiving. It's so deceiving.
Amen.
If you're thinking about Bible study, you're thinking about Christianity, and you're trying to figure this thing out, I'm just going to tell you up front, you've got to know that Jesus demands 100% surrender. Why? Because the greatest command in the Bible is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. When we don't do that, that's the greatest sin. That's what separates us from God. And so to be able to do that, we've got to surrender all of our idols to him. For the Christians, if you've been a disciple for a while or you've been around the church, flip over to Exodus chapter 20. There's a different kind of danger that exists for us. It's still just as threatening, but it's a different kind of danger. Exodus chapter 20. First of all, look at verse 3. The first and the greatest commandment of the 10 Commandments is what? You shall have no other gods before me. This idea of idolatry is front to back in the Bible. It's not just an OT thing, and it's not just a New Testament thing. It's love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength in the New Testament. It's don't have any gods before me in the Old Testament. Now skip down a little bit farther. Look at verse 22 and 23. Here's the danger for those who have kind of been in the faith for a number of years. Skip down to verse 22. Then the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites this, you have seen for yourselves that I have spoken to you from heaven. Do not make any gods to be alongside me. Do not make for yourselves gods of silver or gods of gold. That phrase, don't make any gods to be alongside me, is very, very important. Because what we do as Christians is it's usually not we're throwing God away and we're giving our whole life to some other idol. What it is we get careless. And we stop doing spiritual inventory. We stop letting people into our life. We stop letting the scriptures cut us, or we stop reading our Bible. We stop being soft-hearted. We want to do things our way. And then basically what we're doing is we're constructing some idol right next to God on the throne of our heart. And so it's like, Jesus, yeah, I love you. You get this slice of the pie of my life. And other idols, relationships, money, security, comfort, whatever it is, you get the other portions of the pie of my life. And Jesus is like, That's not the way this relationship works. Jesus says, I will be supreme or I will not be in your life. And so the danger for us as Christians, as we keep faithful, is to check our lives and to make sure that we do not let ourselves build an idol alongside God. It's so, so dangerous. What are some things that happen? One of the things that happen when we don't look at idolatry, but we just kind of look at the outer behavior. What about when we're helping our non-Christian friends learn about what it means to really love God? If you find yourself doing a Bible study with somebody, and maybe you're trying to study out the idea of sin, and you really want them to understand the problem of sin, you could sit down and you could look at a laundry list of bad behaviors, and you could say, hey, if you stop doing these things, then you'll be a good Christian. But if you do these things, then you're a bad person. And it can sort of be like behavior modification in a sense that what happens? It means we've totally neglected what Jesus cares about most, the heart. Does that mean physical sins that we commit are not important? Of course it is. That matters. But where are they coming from? The sins that we commit on the outside are coming from the idols that we worship on the inside.
Amen.